So in this video I'm going to be talking about reaction rate versus substrate concentration. For enzyme-catalyzed reactions. And this enzyme-catalyzed reactions part is important. Alright, so starting off, if you have zero substrate concentration, you're going to have zero reaction rate, nothing to react, because your substrates are your reacting molecules. Now if I increase that substrate concentration a little bit, any time an enzyme happens upon a substrate, it'll be free to help that substrate react. And so it's going to increase really, really quickly as substrate concentration increases here at the beginning. But then something is going to happen. Sometimes when an enzyme encounters a new substrate at these slightly higher concentrations, it'll already be working on another substrate. So as we increase substrate concentration, it isn't going to increase as fast, the reaction rate. Until finally, every single enzyme is working as hard as it can. There's so much substrate that as soon as an enzyme finishes up with one substrate, it's going to immediately encounter another substrate. And so even if you add more substrate, there aren't any free enzymes to make the reaction proceed any faster. And so we're going to level out. And so here you've got a bunch of enzymes, which are green blobs here in my little picture. And you've got only a very few substrates. And so again, anytime an enzyme encounters a substrate, it'll be free to help it react. But then as we increase the substrate concentration a little bit, again, sometimes when an enzyme encounters a new substrate, it'll be free to help it react. We'll have some empty enzymes here. But sometimes it'll already be working on another one. So even though, and this is important to notice, even though the reaction rate is higher than it was at lower concentration, so I am increasing my reaction rate by increasing substrate concentration, I'm not increasing it as much as I was at the lower concentrations. And then finally, up here, every single one of my enzymes is always full of substrate. Which doesn't mean my reaction has stopped, because I've still got these enzyme catalyzing reactions, right? It just means that by adding a bunch of new substrate, I'm not going to speed it up anymore, because as soon as my enzyme is done with this substrate, it's going to immediately move on to another one. And so by dumping more substrate concentration in there, I'm not going to increase the rate of the reaction anymore. And so some important points on this curve. So find for me where the reaction rate is 0. So right here, this point right here, you can see right here the reaction rate is 0. The point up here where this curve levels off is actually where the reaction rate is the greatest. See, and I can tell that simply by looking at my axes. I see that this is the highest reaction rate achieved. It's where the curve levels off. And here, this first point where we hit that is where increasing our substrate concentration isn't going to increase the rate of reaction anymore. Because if I increase this way, my curve is flattened out, so it's just going to stay at the same reaction rate.